let me, if I may, sort of share a quick story that really helps me kind of frame the best way to answer your question. So until the late 1970s in the state of Oklahoma, you could be found guilty and convicted of murder even if there was no body. And you're like, what the hell does this have to do with it? So this is the story of a particular court case. A man was on trial and he was being charged with a crime, the crime of first-degree murder, but there was no actual body. And I think that his defense attorney realized that the best way to make the case was, well, if there's no body, that means this person can actually be alive. So during closing arguments, he stood up and he made a very impassioned plea stating the case on behalf of his client and saying, and the reason I can prove that is because the supposed deceased is going to walk through that door in 5 minutes. Everyone looked up and waited. 5 minutes happened and nobody came through the door. The point he made to the jury, however, was you all looked up, and that means that there likely is reasonable doubt, therefore you cannot find my client guilty. So the jury went back and they spent a day deliberating, and then they came back, and when the judge asked the jury foreman for the verdict, there was a hushed silence and they said, we find the defendant guilty as charged. Everyone was really shocked and unclear as to how that could have been possible. So afterward, the jury saw one of the attorney rather saw one of the people from the jury, out in the lobby, and he pulled him aside and he said, I'm really confused because the point is you all looked up and therefore I demonstrated reasonable doubt. And she said, you're absolutely right, you did. But here's the thing, your client didn't look to the door. My point is that at the end of the day, this is fundamentally all about perspective. And I think that we can speak to the technical craft of sound design and all those other things, but here's the reality. There's often a concern, and particularly with the filmmakers with whom I've worked in those projects where I myself have been the filmmaker in this space, where the concern is always, well, if the proscenium is everything, then people are going to look everywhere, and it's really hard to mediate a narrative and mediate kind of an organic flow because it's not linear storytelling in the same regard. But I think, as Jacqueline mentioned earlier, with regard to kind of some of the new immersive theater that exists, and a lot of these new experiences that are meant to guide you, but really direct you in one way, but create ambient environments that are much more dynamic and afford you the ability to do a lot more things. Our challenge as storytellers in this new and emerging medium is being able to understand that there are ways through sound design, through the direction of character movement and strategic lighting and the like, you can direct a lot, but it isn't the same kind of things that we're accustomed to. I equated in some respects growing up, I used to love going to Disneyland, and if you think of like Haunted Mansion and everything else, those are mediated but immersive experiences. You go through, there's a lot to sort of take in, but there's still by the end of it, hopefully a story that you've taken in that has some context that's taking you from point A to B with regards to being able to tell a journey. And I think what we're all trying to figure out here is how do we marry the best of interactive gaming, how do we marry the best of traditional storytelling, and how do we marry the best of sort of this new generation of redefining a new visual language and cinematic language, because that's really where this will ultimately go. And the thing is, I hope that ITV 2030, ITV 2030, people will laugh at the kind of stuff we did today, because the holodeck will be kind of a common thing. That's certainly the hope of, I think where ultimately it can go over time.